All right, so I'm going to continue my discussion on hedonism, and I wanted to focus on the fat acceptance movement, which is also called the body positivity movement. So, first things first, this movement was started by chubby chasers, right? And these were fetishists who were mad that their fetish wasn't socially acceptable. And that really tells you everything you need to know about this movement. Present day, the movement is filled with a lot of young, overweight women, and emphasis on young because the older ones tend to die off from obesity-related illnesses. But anyways, right, these young, overweight women, they see all of these beautiful women on social media and, right, these it girls on the front page of TikTok, and they wonder, why can't I have all of these followers and fame, right? Why can't I be her? And instead of looking inward, self-reflecting, and realizing that it's because of their gluttony and their lack of discipline, they look outward and blame society and everyone else. You see, in the mind of a fat acceptance member, they are just as pretty as the woman you see on the front page of TikTok. And it's actually all of our faults that they're not treated the same way as these it girls. And not only is it your fault, but you're an oppressive, misogynistic bigot for not seeing them in the same light. So there's this denial of truth. They're willfully ignorant of the fact that their weight is their own fault. And that comes in the form of ignoring calories in, calories out. And calories in, calories out, it's a fundamental law of thermodynamics, right? And on a metaphysical or a spiritual level, this is just the law of equivalent exchange, right? From, FMA, right? It's sometimes referred to as justice or karma. What goes in must come out. And fat acceptance members, they don't believe in this fundamental law of reality. Many of them are postmodernists, so they actually don't believe in any laws of reality. They think it's impossible for them to lose weight and that being fat is in their genes or their DNA. So you can see this ideological bias of pseudoscientific materialism. And they have this same underlying delusion that perpetuates throughout their ideology. And this is, of course, a result of denying the truth and virtue. So they end up creating and parroting these imbecilic falsities, right? Like how not wanting to be fat is racist, or how you're a bigot if you don't date fat people. So you see this demonization of normal people and the demonization of non-disordered desires. And you have this made-up label and boogeyman, right? This specter. And it's called fat phobia. And if you don't do their political bidding and subscribe to their ideology, you become fat phobic. And if you're fat phobic, then you need to be canceled. Right? This is the new witch hunt, right? This is the new McCarthyism. This is how they try to coerce you into activism on social media. It's basically slavery, right? Unpaid labor. And this is really the underlying threat made by these quote-unquote progressive ideologies. It's do what I say or else we will shun you from society and we will ruin your life. And unfortunately, a lot of young women fall into this trap of quote-unquote activism. And I noticed that these ideologies that rely on victimhood, they typically prey on young women. Women are naturally compassionate and caring, and in my experience, they usually keep an eye out for the little guy, right? The underdog. And the larger progressive narrative is that anyone that is oppressed is automatically the good guy. So you have a lot of women pushing these inane political stances like fat acceptance and subscribing to these online ideologues, pushing their rhetoric into the public sphere. And of course, it's all false rhetoric, right? All lies and half-truths. You have the historical lies, right? Basically the myths that they spread. One being that fat people in the past were the sexual ideal, that they were the it girls. And this is just a straight out lie because fat people were never really seen as attractive, right? Just take a look back at the ancient Greek statues. And ancient Greece is a big inspiration for modern Western culture. And you're gonna have your outlier cultures, definitely, for sure. And there's also some truth to the fact that a fat person in the olden days would have been seen as well off, but they were also seen as greedy and gluttonous, right? And this is rightfully so. Secondly, there's this extreme perversion of beauty, and it's this propaganda campaign they have that you can see on TV and especially online, where a lot of these body positivity activists carry this unearned pride. And it's like a lot of them think that labeling themselves as beautiful is what makes them beautiful, right? Like, you'll often see many of them talk about how beauty is based on self-confidence. And this is obviously not true, because beauty is not based on your own opinion. But of course, they think that the only reason that overweight people aren't seen as beautiful is because of quote unquote cultural fat phobia, right? It's the specter. And the reason that they believe this is because they don't realize that beauty is objective. And by objective, I mean it is timeless and spaceless. Now, some might disagree and say that beauty is in the eye of the beholder, or that it's subjective, based on preference. But, there's whether or not you prefer brunette or blondes, beard or clean shaven, light or dark skin. But those are really more of the superficial aesthetic aspects of beauty. But there are underlying themes of beauty that exist regardless of culture or time. And some of this we can understand mathematically, right? There's shapes, symmetry, the golden ratio, all of these patterns that correspond with ideal beauty. And then there's also the spiritual side, right? The virtues. Beauty is often a product of virtue, mainly the virtue of discipline. And you can actually attain objective beauty through things like working out and having discipline. These are the psychic behaviors that remain objective within humans, right? They are the psychic drives behind romance and reproduction. So when we see people who are fit and people who are in shape, and we notice that these people are beautiful, it's an unconscious recognition and affirmation of virtue. And this recognition and attraction is what perpetuates the human race. But of course, these fat acceptance and body positivity activists, they hate gym culture because things like discipline in the context of maintaining health, it's just too hard for them. And all of their rhetoric of their movement, it rests on these shaky foundations, right? The foundation being this idea that obese people are just biologically predisposed to being overweight. And this obviously isn't true. And all of their problems are really just self-inflicted, right? Any issue that comes with being overweight is their own fault because they choose not to work out. And at the end of the day, these are hedonists, right? Right. That's why you'll see that fat acceptance members, they also tend to be in the LGBTQ plus movement. And as I stated in another video, hedonists use the LGBTQ movement to platform and normalize their perversions, right? So let me just make this clear again. Not all LGBTQ members are hedonists. But all these opportunistic addicts are joining these movements because they see that it legitimates and encourages their addictive drives. And as I said before in another video, all hedonists are addicts. And addicts require psychological care. They don't need this wish-washy postmodernist therapy that has become so common nowadays. What they actually need is to get in touch with their psyche and reconnect with their soul. And they need to come face to face with the harsh reality that they're sick. And you really can't do all that without first accepting God and the truth. So some of you may ask, why do you care so much, Reese? Right? And The reason I care is because, I grew up overweight. So at the end of the day, I know it's just about self-control. And I've come to the belief that it's important we reject these movements because America is currently suffering from a hedonistic crisis, right? We see that the growth of materialism and pleasure-seeking behavior has led to a decrease in spiritualism, right? No one believes in honor, truth, or virtue anymore, right? Modern culture has reduced these words to being cliche. But when it comes to our ancestors, to them, these were things worth dying for. And we see that modernity's rejection of truth and virtue, it's leading to a gradual societal collapse. So at the end of the day, this is something we can really all unite on, right? Whether or not you're a Democrat or a Republican, a communist or a monarchist, a healthy republic requires a healthy citizenry. And lastly, you also have to remember that phobia isn't real, right? And by that I mean it's not bigoted to not want to be overweight. That's just really your basic human survival instincts. Fat phobia is really just another label created by these hedonists, and they're mostly sponsored by the food industry and platformed by the mainstream media. It's a fake label created by a fake movement, partially owned by these investment groups like BlackRock or Vanguard, which are owned by shadowy global bankers and commercialists. These bankers have a stranglehold on the West, and they don't see us as normal people, right? They don't see us as normal human beings. They see us as a means to satisfy their profit-seeking addictions. So we really have to take special care not to fall to these quote-unquote progressive movements, and not to fall victim to their lies.